Welcome back to Topic 2, Lesson 3, Example 5. Today, in this video, we're going to determine positives or negatives of an interval. And the first thing to think about when we look at positives and negatives is what makes something a positive and what makes it a negative. All right, so I am going to use this highlighter here. Anything in the, push that save button, anything in the positive y quadrant, which is basically half the graph. Oh, I went a little too crazy there. Sorry, guys. So basically anything in this yellow region is going to be positive. So this is positive. And then anything in this blue region is going to be negative. And the only way we could go from positive to negative is if we cross the x-axis. So notice how even when x is negative, as long as y is positive, the function is positive. Even if x is positive, if your value here is negative, the function is negative. Basically the doorways between my positive and negative are where my graph crosses the x-axis or where y is equal to 0. Because remember, 0 is that neutral zone. So this is basically the neutral zone from going to from positive to negative or negative to positive, because y is not positive or negative. So when we're looking at the idea of the parabola, here's my nice parabola, we are looking at these points of going from this positive to this negative, which is basically when y is equal to 0 or the zeros of our graph. So when we get those factors, we're looking for when x is negative a or negative b in our case here. So we're looking for when my graph is equal to 0. And then because we probably have to do intervals, remember you don't include this interval, so this would be a parentheses. And you don't include this interval, so that would be a parentheses. So let's look at this. Let me grab this example. Let's go over to the Smart Notebook and let's look at this. Hi, so again, we went over the positive and negatives, and now you know that when y is equal to 0 is when we will have that basically doorway from going to positive to negative or negative to positive. So I'm going to set y equal to 0, and I'm going to set this equal to the equation. And again, I'm going to factor this equation. Sorry, I'm just moving it down a little bit so I have a little bit more space here, because I don't know, that y was freaking me out a little bit for no reason whatsoever. All right, so we have 1 and negative 3, negative 1 and 3. 2 does not go into 3, and we kind of end there. I'm going to look for, if I add them across, we get negative 2 and we get positive 2 here. So these two, and then my a is 1, so I'm going to divide by 1 just to show you, just in case you forgot if a is something not equal to 1. And so what we are looking at here is x plus 1 times x minus 3. So now we have to think, okay, so what value of x will make this statement true? So I'm going to set this equal to 0, solve for x, and I get x is equal to negative 1. Okay, looking at this right here, I'm going to set this equal to 0, and I will get x is equal to 3. The next thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at my leading coefficient. This is the coefficient that is in the front of my quadratic equation. It's usually the coefficient tied to the x squared. So our coefficient here is 1. It's positive, and that means that my graph opens upward, which means my little arrows will go up like this. All right, so let's get my nice drawing parabola tool here. That did not go through anything that I needed it to go through, so let's do this again. Now I know my y-intercept, that is not the best. Let me see if I can scoot it over a little bit. There we go. There we go. I know that my y-intercept is -3 because it is the constant here, or I could substitute 0 in for x, and I'll get -3. So when x is 0, y is -3. Okay, so now they want to know the intervals. Well, remember, this is going off, or this is starting from. If I were to start walking this graph, I would start at -infinity. And I would walk this graph going all the way down until I get to this point right here. This point is 0, but so I can't include it because 0 is not positive nor is it negative. So I'm going to put a bracket. I mean, not bracket, parentheses. I'm not going to put a bracket because a bracket means that we're including this. Then I'm walking underground. I'm in the negative space here. And I'm walking back up. And the next time that I cross that doorway between the negative space and the positive space is here at 3. And again, I'm crossing the doorway. I'm going from negative to positive, so I can't include the value of 3. So I'm going to put a parentheses, because a parentheses means we're not including that value. And then if I continue walking, I'm going to be walking to infinity. There is no stopping me from reaching the stars. So my intervals here are -infinity. Every time, that circle always gets me every time. -infinity to 1 and 3 to infinity. And then the parentheses are there because we do not include those 0 values. So here they solve it. Here I did mine graphically. Here what they're doing is they're plugging in values that are less than -1, and they're looking to see if anything less than -1 is positive. If you look at the graph, really anything left of this is going to be positive. Anything right of this and anything between this. So they're testing the points between, because this graph will never go back down to negative. This graph, like I said, these are the only 2 doorways. It's like this is a wall, and these are the only places that you can cross the wall. So this graph may go like this, but it's never going to cross the x-axis at any other point. So they are testing what happens before -1 by picking any number. It doesn't have to be a specific number, just as long as it's less than -1. Then they're looking at the values between -1 and 3 to see if it's positive or negative, and this one is negative. And then they're checking any values that are greater than 3. So anything that is greater than 3, I could pick 100 if I wanted to. They chose 6. And they're seeing if the sign of the answer is positive or negative. And again, this works because those are the only spots. -1 and 3 are the only places on the graph that you can actually cross the x-axis. All right, so here's the graph. And so we see that x is less than -1 and x is greater than 3 are the intervals at which we are positive. All right, guys, so I hope you got something out of this video. And if you have any questions, please email me, send a remind to me, or put comments in your classwork, and we will see you in the next video.